welcome back to the Heartland Leadership Podcast, a podcast all about leadership and the way of Jesus. I'm Clinton.
I'm Dave.
Hi, I'm Tony.
And today we want to have a little chat about spiritual rhythms.
Ooh.
Not quite like a drum rhythm, a spiritual rhythm.
Sure.
And I would say that this is an area that I've learned a ton about since I've became on staff.
What have you learned? I'm interested. What is spiritual rhythm to you?
Yeah, so I think of it as a plan and intentionality to growing spiritually.
Huh.
And different practices that I do at different intervals, different rhythms throughout my life to help me achieve certain spiritual goals or to grow closer to Jesus.
But what do you mean that you've grown a lot since you've been on staff in this area?
Can I jump in? I know one thing that was surprising about starting here at Heartland and starting, especially working for you, was your emphasis on Sabbath. When I first started,
That's a big one for me.
that was huge. Like, I was familiar with the term, familiar with the concept of Sabbath. Although before I started working here, it was more like I was familiar with the concept of weekend. Like you work through the week and then you get the weekend, and that's when you don't work. But I remember something you said early on.
I had a stigma against people who did Sabbath.
Right. Like
Really?
they were.
Because I saw Jesus saying a bunch of mean stuff about it.
Oh, wow.
I thought that was like, those are old rules. That's not something we should
It's
do
not something we do.
I guess Jewish people do it, but
There's probably still some people that believe that.
Yeah. Well,
I did a 180 on it.
yeah, one thing that you said to me early on that kind of highlighted how serious this was for you and kind of surprised me was you said to me, if I find out you've been working on your Sabbath, I'll fire you.
Oh, no. Did I say that?
If I find out that you've been scheduling appointments on your Sabbath, you're not going to make it here. I'm going to let go of you. And I was like, oh, weird. Weird thing to be very stern about, like for a boss to say, you absolutely must not work. But very grateful that you were that strongly opinionated about it.
And you were stern with me as well a few times.
I did, yeah.
So I'm like, this is the only time this one guy can meet. He's like, cancel it.
Cancel it. Don't do it. Yeah, I remember.
Well, maybe we've gone a little too far on that.
Well, in terms of, I don't want to say you were Pharisee level of like legalistic.
Sounds that way.
But it did instill in me, this is something Dave takes really seriously. And as a guy who's been, how long you been in ministry? 30-something years or nearly 30 years?
Just about 30, yeah.
So you've been doing it for a long time and you haven't flamed out. Like so many people seem to burn out. And when I ask you what the secret is, it's Sabbath, it's spiritual rhythm, is the answer that I get. So it was a real wake-up call for me.
So that was a brand new concept for you when you started here. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you said you did a 180 on it from where you were?
Yeah, from my thinking on it, I had never practiced it ever.
Wow. So that's good for me to know, guys, because honestly, as new people come on staff, I just assume that they kind of get that, but you had the complete opposite concept.
Can you tell us real quick, the audience, like what is Sabbath? I would guess there's a host of people that may not.
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes to a Jewish concept that on the seventh day, you rest, right? You take time to cease what you're doing. You break the...
Doesn't it mean cease? Like
it means
Shabbat?
to... Yeah, Shabbat, it's a Hebrew word for ceasing, and it comes really from the pattern or the rhythm that God gave us. So it took him, 7 days to create the world, right? But on that seventh day, he rested from his work that he's done on the previous 6 days. And there are all kind of theologians that can probably, a lot smarter than me, that can argue as to why we shouldn't still be doing this, et cetera, et cetera. I've just found it personally to be something that sustains me.
Well, isn't there also, forgive me if I'm ignorant about this, but like in Jewish law, every 7 years, you let the land rest as well?
Right.
Jubilee, you cancel all the debts. It's like every 7 years, there's this sort of, this rhythm to you work such and such an amount of time and then you stop if you want it to be sustainable. Can I ask, when did you start taking Sabbath seriously and why? Did somebody tell you that they would fire you if you didn't take a Sabbath?
No, they never told me that. But when I was at the church, Oak Hills Church in California, is when I first started to step into some of the spiritual formation language and started to practice some of these things as part of my own personal rule of life, I would call it, is where my spiritual rhythm works itself out. So it's like a written thing that I want to follow that helps me live the kind of life that I want to live. And Sabbath is one of those things.
Do you have a rule of life?
Yes.
Written out somewhere in your house?
Yeah, I have it on my computer. But yeah, maybe I should have it in my house, like written on the wall. But Yeah, so as part of that spiritual rhythm, on the seventh day, that's part of my weekly rhythm, is Melody and I celebrate Sabbath together, which is not just another day off, by the way.
Right, that's where I was going to
Yeah,
go next.
Eugene
Let's just dive into Sabbath here.
Well, so Eugene Peterson says that if it's just another day off, then it's a bastard Sabbath, which I just love that. It's not like a real Sabbath. So a real Sabbath is where you break the normal routine of life and you center yourself on your relationship with God, your relationship with the people that you love the most.
And I've been growing in this a lot, like evolving. So when I came on staff, I heard you taught the exact same way a couple years ago, but I was practicing the bastard Sabbath, I guess.
Okay.
When I first came on, I ceased from Heartland stuff, but I kind of was treating it as a day off. And just recently, in the beginning of March, maybe mid-February, I got turned on to this podcast called Fight, Hustle, and Hurry.
Fantastic podcast.
And it dawned on me that I had just been being really selfish with my Sabbath. So I'm married, I have children, but I was kind of like just squirreling away in my basement, just doing me time. Meanwhile, Sarah's not getting a break from all of her stuff. She needs Sabbath as well. So what we started to do is like a family Sabbath. We're doing it all together. So we have these two candles, that one is for ceasing and one is for celebrating. And so I'm trying to teach the kids that, like they get to light the candle. What's this one mean? Oh, it means to stop. Well, kind of, it means cease. And celebrate these two C words.
So you have the whole family involved
so
in it.
good, man.
That is excellent.
Table, they see mom and dad put the cell phone away into the cupboard. We're not going to be, because that's a break from how I normally live. Normally I have that with me all the time. I'm scrolling it like while I'm sitting on the John or whatever.
That was too much information.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
And we'll do something, at least a big chunk of the 24 hours will be, we're doing something as a family. It could be as simple as watching like Frozen 2 together. We're all gonna be in the living room. We're not gonna get up and do different stuff. Gonna have some snacks, some treats.
But it's intentional. It's really intentional is what you're describing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that, Clint.
That's been huge for our family.
Oh, I bet it has. I was going to say, you're changing generations with that, especially if you can continue. I mean, you're making that kind of impact because you're influencing your children who will probably influence their children. They'll grow up thinking this is what our family did. And it's not about rules and regulations. It's about the freedom that God gives us in that day. Mike Suit, who's on our staff, says this a lot, and it's meant a lot to me, is that like, okay, man was created on the sixth day in the biblical creation story. What's the first thing then man did on the seventh day?
Rest.
He rested.
Yeah.
And so we rest so that we can work, so that we can be productive, right? Mm-hmm. And like what we do on Thursdays, Melody gets up, she strips the beds, we start doing the laundry, we start what's called our Sabbath prep. So we kind of clean the house Thursday afternoon so that we're ready to go, so that by sundown, at least in our family, and it's just me and Melody, but we still celebrate Sabbath. By sundown, we're ready to go, and then we're ceasing and celebrating until Friday night at sundown, which is when I can re-engage with my phone and all the quote-unquote important stuff about life that I feel can't go on without me. Because that's really what Sabbath is. It's a reminder that I'm not in control, that life is not about me. God's in charge, and I trust him, and I'm going to rest in that love and that care.
So that sounds great. You both sound super spiritual and awesome, but I'm wondering how...
And we are, Tony,
and you
just
are.
so you know.
Yeah. I'm wondering how sustainable is that, and what do you do when you hit seasons where that kind of thing isn't feasible? So like just looking at my own life right now, Fridays here at Heartland are what we set aside as Sabbath, but Melissa works on Fridays. She gets Saturday off, but I work Saturdays now. And I'm often doing stuff on Sundays as well. So for us to have a day that's overlapped with us both having nothing on that we can set aside, that's not something that's on our calendar at the moment, and I don't really see how it could be. So are there seasons to this thing, or should I really make it a priority to carve out time for just us each week?
I think there are seasons to it, and I think you have to fight for it. Mm-hmm. I think that you have to have conversations with your wife, with your employer, There are some people that are not going to be able to take a whole 24 hours.
Right.
It's okay. Maybe it's a Sabbath afternoon. Maybe it's even a Sabbath hour. But I do think doing it together, like you mentioned, Clint, with your family is like the best case scenario. And I think at times you're going to have to be flexible enough to shift and find something that works for you guys, right? Yeah. And I think, Tony, that might mean you say, hey, I can't be committed on Saturday morning right now because that's when I'm taking my Sabbath. And then we'll have to adjust to some of that. Yeah. And I think there have been seasons for that with Melody and I. Like I said earlier, it's not a legalistic thing.
I think you start missing the point if it becomes legalistic, right?
That's exactly right.
It becomes one more thing to do.
That's exactly right. And to that point, like it is breaking your routine. It's not about not working. I know a lot of people grew up in a home that was really like conservative and you couldn't do anything fun on the Sabbath. And so it got this terrible connotation. It was like, oh, I don't want nothing to do with the Sabbath. In fact, like one of the things I love to do on the Sabbath is mow my lawn because that's different for me, So when I can go out there, start a project, finish a project, got all the lines heading in the right direction, like I feel good about that. So that's something that gives me life. Where if you were just looking from the outside, you're like, oh, that guy's working on the Sabbath. So I think a lot of it is your motivation as well with why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so you are sometimes doing things. You're not just sitting in a meditative trance for 24 hours. No. You're not just like locking yourself in a prayer closet for a whole day.
No, like for Melody and I mean, if I'm getting real honest, and again, we now that our kids are grown and out of the house, we have a little more freedom with some of this, but we both take the day off together. We sleep in normally, I'm up by 6:30 most days. Sabbath, it's 8:30, and then we'll go for a walk. We'll make love, take a nap. We'll make a great food together. I mean, you're just doing things that got you guys really excited there, didn't it?
Great.
Sorry. That's just part of our Sabbath
Good
rhythm.
for you. No, that's great. Good Sabbath. Yep.
Okay. All right. I'll stop now.
But I guess I was wondering, so then what filter do you use to determine, is this an appropriate thing to do on my Sabbath? Like I've heard the language, what fills your tank? And so for you, like, mowing the lawn apparently fills your tank.
Not every week, but some weeks.
Okay, yeah.
If it brings me life.
If it brings you life, okay.
Yeah, if I feel like it brings me life. Like for right now, during this time, Zoom calls would not bring me life. So I'm not jumping on another video call on a Friday. I'm just not going to do it. Right. And if somebody, it's really important. Everything's really important. Nope, sorry, I'm not available on Fridays.
I'll say if I can push back.
Yeah, push back.
Because I think you're right, like what you're saying is true, but I was taking that what gives me life for like a year and a half and being really selfish with my Sabbath.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
What gives me life, and maybe I have a twisted life in mind.
That may be true, Clint, but that's another podcast.
What gives me life, like I really enjoy like solitude and being alone and kind of like hanging out with Tony playing games or something. And like horsing around, like taking care of kids and stuff doesn't always bring me life, if I can say.
It can for sure be work, taking care of kids, leading a family, right?
But like, I think just in my season of life, and I'm married, and I want Sarah to experience Sabbath as well. So I think that means like I need to take on a little more responsibility or work during my Sabbath, so that our whole family can experience it together.
And can
so
flourish.
It's not all about just like what brings you life, Clinton.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think for you...
It brings our family life.
Yeah, I think for you to have some time with your kids and with Sarah and plan that, like you have to plan. You have to be intentional, to your point. And then for you to have some time for just you, even if it's just an hour or two, in the morning or in the afternoon, and Sarah to get some time for just her, I think for you to talk about that and plan your Sabbath out is really important.
Because I was asking her, like, well, what's some stuff that you would want to do if it were just up to you? And she's like, I'd love to take a bath. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Let's make that, okay.
We can do that.
I can make that happen.
Yeah. And she's probably happy as can be, right? While you're out with the kids. And that's a great Sabbath. Yeah.
So that's part of a weekly rhythm.
Good.
But there are other rhythms too.
You could have a daily, you could have a weekly, monthly, yearly, seasonally.
Yeah.
Maybe a life rhythm.
Well, so what you're talking about is this rule of life, or this what we would call a spiritual development
what do you
plan.
mean, rule of life? When you say that, I don't think anyone's ever explained it to me. I think mission statement.
No. So a mission statement is why you do what you do. So you should have a life mission statement. Like, why does Tony Allen get out of bed every morning?
Man.
Okay.
You just spun me into an existential crisis
Okay,
right
no,
there.
that's a whole nother podcast too. But a rule of life is just a listing of kind of your spiritual rhythm and your intentionality.
Yeah, right.
And so my rule of life includes some daily rules. Like we mentioned, I have certain spiritual readings that I do every day that come to my email that we do at the kitchen table during a meal. Those are part of our daily rhythms together.
It's like a plan.
Yeah, it's like a plan. It's a spiritual development plan is what we call it. Then you have the weekly, at least for me, you have a monthly rhythm. Part of my monthly rhythm includes going to talk with a spiritual director once a month. It's taking half a day of a study day once a month. Then you have...
Can you say more about each of those? What's a spiritual director?
So a spiritual director has been really helpful for me. It's like somewhere between a counselor and a pastor. And some people might say, well, wait a minute, Dave, you are a pastor, right? But every pastor needs a pastor.
Sure.
And so this is a person that I can go to, and they listen to me, they help me reflect, they ask really great questions, and from a Christian perspective, help challenge me to become more like Christ. So it's usually like a 45-minute to an hour session. I pay $40 or $50, and it's a great investment because to prepare for that, I spend some time journaling and thinking about what God's saying and doing in me, and then I go have someone help me reflect back on that. And so it's really been a life-giving thing for me. So that's the spiritual direction piece. And then the study day is literally, and this is, again, intentionality. I go in my schedule, and I X out a certain portion of that day, and nothing's getting scheduled on that day. I need time for just me and God. And the thing that I'm fighting now is for that time to literally be just me and God time, because everything that I study and I learn, I want to turn into a sermon. Or I want to turn into a lesson or a class or a course that I'm going to teach. And I am really struggling with that. Just go with your book and be with God. It doesn't have to become another thing.
Yeah. So how do you know when you're getting this balance right?
That's good.
So I can imagine overindulging in spiritual rhythms or some spiritual activities and neglecting things that just straight up need to be done, grunt work, concrete work that needs to be done, and you've sort of got your head in the clouds a bit too much. But on the other hand, I can imagine just only go, and then burning out. So
Seems like that latter one is way more common.
it seems like that's
Have you
more the danger.
encountered someone that is too deeply entrenched in the spiritual rhythms?
They're just
that an
not
actual
quite on
problem?
planet Earth.
I think it's a great balance between contemplation and action.
Great.
Both of those things have to go together. I think Richard
That's very
Rohr
Rohrian.
does it so well, right? Both of those things is a both and. I do think, to your point, Clint, people tend to default to the action side, and especially in our society, and the get it done side. But I think it's a balance of both of those things. And the way that I know I'm out of rhythm, I might say, like you can tell when somebody's playing drums, they're out of rhythm, right? Right away.
Yes, very quickly.
I can tell I'm out of rhythm when I start forgetting things.
Sure.
I know I'm too much on the action
Things
side.
slip through the cracks.
Because see, to me, spiritual formation in general is not about me just becoming more and more spiritual. Spiritual formation is about me widening my heart toward a world that needs what Jesus has to offer through me.
Wow.
And
That's tweetable.
really,
That was
I don't
great.
know what that is.
I
didn't
like
know
the
what I just
widening
said.
my heart. That was
Widening
good.
my heart. But that opening my heart to the world, whatever that might
The
be.
Grinch. When
I haven't seen
grew
it.
3 sizes.
There you
that-
go. Yeah.
Yeah, it broke the scale.
Yeah, but it wasn't just for him. It was for all of the people in Grinchville or wherever he was. Whoville, that's right. Whoville, not Grinchville. That'd be a whole nother movie, I suppose. But yeah, so that's the goal. So when I start going too fast, I start forgetting things. And it's like, uh-oh, I'm out of rhythm. That's one of the things.
Interesting.
Do you have any of that?
For me, I know that I'm doing too much or not taking enough time for Sabbath when I start really resenting people. That's how it creeps up in me.
Right.
Anybody who has a demand on my time or wants something from me, when I am tapped out, I resent them for it, and I have nothing to give them. And so I will tend to be short with people, shorter than I really want to be.
That's good.
Or not as present with people as I want to be or could be if I was in a healthy place. And
Well, you're very self-aware.
yeah, at least aware of my own unhealth, but yeah.
But that's a great first step to know yourself that well.
And what it can end up doing is it can cause me, like you were saying, Clint, to swing from this end to just binge selfishness. Like, forget the whole world then. I'm going to shut everyone out, including my wife. I just don't want to deal with anybody, kind of a thing. So, yeah, when I start noticing that people reaching out to me is frustrating me, something's got to change. I'm not in a healthy place.
So for me, on the other side of that, when I know I've had too much time contemplating, because I told you about the one out of balance, but the out of balance rhythm on the contemplation side, that you're going to laugh at this, is when I come up with all these ideas. So like my annual rhythm is I go away, I've talked about this lots of times, but I go away to this monastery. I spend 3, 4, 5 days just being quiet. But when I come back from there, I've got like all these ideas I can't wait to just like share with people. And I can tell by the looks in people's eyes, like, okay, I spent way too much time with this. I need to back up, slow down.
Yeah.
So that part of that is learning and growing in your own self-awareness.
You had mentioned daily, weekly, monthly, seasonally. I'm wondering if there's maybe any place to talk a little about what a sabbatical is. You took a sabbatical last year.
Yeah.
And that was...
shares a similar root word.
It does. The etymology sounds similar. Okay. It was after 7 years here at Heartland, right? So similar kind of rhythm to a Sabbath.
Yeah.
And this was an extended time away to what? What's a sabbatical?
Yeah.
What's the point of it?
So this was our second sabbatical. We took one 10 years prior at another church, and it's basically a time to get away and refresh your soul. And intentionally, as a pastor, when you deal with people and relationships all the time, it's very important that you step away from that and remind yourself that you're not as central to everything as you think you are, and not as necessary, right? The other part of it is to give people a little bit of a break from you.
Sure.
And that's important. And I think not every church is able to give their pastors a Sabbath. I'm very grateful for my past church, Bridgeway, and also here at Heartland to be able to do that. Some people would resent people who take a Sabbath because they don't get one. Why don't I get one? I wish I had a job where I had a Sabbath. Well, my response would be like, go get one. Go get a job where you get a Sabbath, right? I mean, if you resent it, go do it.
Yeah.
And I think part of like what I went away to do was just spend time with Melody, almost like an extended Sabbath, but we did it over the course of 8 to 10 weeks,
right,
where we were away in a different setting, no expectations. It's one of the reasons I really like the monastery so much, is because I can go down to the monastery, I can have a meal, sit right across from another person and not be expected to continue the conversation or have the next word or, be hospitable. I'm just me down there. And same way on a sabbatical. And I think that's what's so difficult is when you come back from a sabbatical and people don't get it.
Sure.
As to why you went on a sabbatical, that can hurt.
Yeah.
And, because as a pastor, I'm taking a sabbatical because I'm trying to be proactive and I'm trying to protect myself. I don't know if you realize this.
You want to work from the rest still.
Yeah, right.
Charge up for this next season.
Yeah,
right,
and I want to come back excited for my job. The problem is so many pastors, they go on a sabbatical and then they leave their church, because they realize what they've gotten themselves into. And the reason I wanted to be proactive, and I will always be proactive about sabbatical, is because I see a lot of my colleagues burning out. I see some of my colleagues killing themselves.
Yeah.
Because they're running so hard, or they step into an affair or an addiction.
They self-destruct.
They self-destruct. So yeah. I try to get on the front end of that and be proactive. Now, could that happen to me? Yeah, it could happen to any one of us. But I want to do everything I can to protect my soul from that happening to me. And so that's why sabbatical was so important for me, and I'm so grateful for a church that allowed me to do that.
Do you have any, longer term
rhythms
or goals, like a decade or
life? I have a lifetime. So Melody and I would love to go do this walk. It's like I want to say it's like a 60-day walk and pilgrimage through Europe and through Spain.
Yeah.
And just to visit these different churches and hike and walk and be with God and alone. Someday we'd love to be able to do something like that. I don't know if that's realistic, but it's good to have a goal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also started to develop some quarterly goals that I'm kind of playing around with. And that's the thing I would encourage you with. Like, you got to find something that works for you. You know, like if you got young kids and you just can't do what I'm doing at my stage of life, it's okay, but find something that you can do and that works for you. If you have young kids, teach them what it's like to have moments of quiet, you know?
And sorry, I don't feel like we addressed this yet, and maybe it's too obvious, but kind of as we're wrapping up, why would someone do any of this stuff? Like, why are we even thinking about like Sabbath and
it's such a good question.
Like, why should I start to inject my life with these weird little habits and monk-like practices?
So for me, that's a really important question. I'm glad you asked it, because I want to prepare my heart and my life to be ready to be with God in eternity. That's why I do these things. I want to do the things in this life that I can control, these spiritual disciplines, spiritual practices, to help prepare me to become the kind of person who will enjoy being with God forever in his kingdom. Mm-hmm. And so if his kingdom really is a kingdom of, you know, where there's silence and there's time alone and there's love, then I want to teach myself what that's like, so I'm ready to live in that kingdom. So that's how I see this life, is a preparation for the life to come.
So, I mean, I think one implication of that would be that some people are living their lives where they will, let's say, pass away one day and be confronted with the God of the universe and like not want to be a part of it because they've calloused their heart, let's say, by selfishness or whatever sin dominated their life or something, to where they're not attracted to that life with God. Is that kind of what you're saying? And so you put these rhythms in place to like become the kind of person that would want to be with God forever?
Yeah, it's a process of spiritual formation for me. So I'm forming every single day, every single decision. I am forming myself into the person I want to be. And some days I make progress, some days I mess up and I fall back and I've got to go try to get it right again. But there's not, I forgot who wrote about this, but there's not some like cosmic car wash that we go through when we die that instantly makes us, okay, now you're just going to be ready for, like we take ourselves with us into eternity.
Yeah.
So we're in this soul that our body is in right now, or I guess the other way around, right? We're creating this moment where we're ready to be with God in eternity.
Yeah. It's like life with God begins now.
It is now. Like
now.
This is eternity, right?
Here we are.
We are embodied souls. Like that is the most real part about us, this soul that will live forever and ever. So how do we prepare that to be with God in his kingdom for all of eternity? That's what drives me to do these things, and it should always result in a widened or enlarged heart toward a world that desperately needs it.
That's great. I would just add to, I know at least for myself as somebody who's in ministry, and I'm sure there's folks listening to this who maybe aren't, but I know if I get caught up in the doing of making the machine run and making a Sunday morning happen, okay, got to pick the songs and got to pick a band and rehearse, and then I got to come up with something to say between these songs, and you know, if I'm not carving out time to sit with God and actually hear from him and talk to him and be with him, then everything else I'm doing becomes super empty, very empty. Much easier for me to like actually lead worship if I've worshiped the other 6 days of the week.
That's so good.
And then I step on stage and just keep doing what I've created, you know, a lifestyle of doing. Yeah. But if I'm just like, if I don't give God a thought or space in my mind or heart throughout the week and then step on stage and expect to lead people to him, almost nothing more stressful than that. And it's a huge waste of time. So
that's such a great analogy. That's exactly same kind of thing for going into eternity. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks for being so like open and vulnerable about what's going on in your life. And I think that was really helpful for me. Hopefully you found it helpful as well. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow. We're across all the different platforms, Spotify, iTunes. So be sure you can put in your email on our website so you'll be notified of when the next episode drops, but it'll be every Monday. So we'll see you next time.